lens within the eyes. Anbach Privacy Screen Filters.
A meal that gives you strength anywhere. A meal that lets you experience various tastes. Gyeongnam Foods products, which have proven safety standards thanks to persistence and pride in quality, convey happiness all around the world. A variety of flavors that can be enjoyed anytime, anywhere. Makes your day happier. Always keeps your everyday happiness. My own secret happiness routine. Bonbi.
In our headlines on this Thursday, November 7th, here on the Korean Peninsula. Donald Trump is returning to the White House next year, having won more than the 270 electoral votes needed to secure the U.S. presidential election. And speaking to him over the phone this morning, President Yoon Suk-yeol called for stronger bilateral ties moving forward. And with regard to domestic matters, President Yoon Suk-yeol addressed the nation in a televised speech also on this Thursday morning to mark the end of the first half of his term in office, after which he spent substantial time fielding a host of questions from members of the media. Also, Korea's current account balance remained in the black for the fifth month in a row in September, amounting to over $11.1 billion, bolstered by global demand for chips and cars. Former President Donald Trump is returning to the White House next year, having garnered well over the 270 electoral votes needed to win the race. Our foreign affairs correspondent Bae Eun-ji starts us off.
Trump has been declared the official winner and the 47th President of the United States, after gaining more than the 270 electoral votes needed to win this year's presidential election. Races haven't been called yet in Nevada and Arizona, but he is in the lead in both states, meaning that he has practically won in all 7 key battleground states. Those include Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Michigan, grouped as blue wall states that were once known for their strong Democratic support.
But it's a political victory that our country has never seen before, nothing like this. I want to thank the American people for the extraordinary honor of being elected your 47th president and your 45th president.
Meanwhile, Harris delivered a concession speech, telling supporters that they must accept the results, while adding that she spoke with Trump and congratulated him on his victory.
A fundamental principle of American democracy is that when we lose an election, we accept the results. That principle, as much as any other, distinguishes democracy from monarchy or tyranny.
While the count continues in some states, voter turnout in this year's presidential election is expected to be close to the record high set in 2020. According to a Washington Post analysis of data from the Associated Press and the University of Florida Election Lab, as of 6 p.m. Eastern Time on Wednesday, voter turnout for this election stood at 65%. This year's figure is not expected to surpass the record of 66% reached 4 years ago, but it is said to be the second highest in the past century. Since the U.S. electoral system is based on indirect voting, it will still take weeks before the tallies are officially confirmed. The states will certify their results, and each state's executive, the governor in most cases, will sign certificates on December 11th that formally allocate the state's electors to the winning candidate. Then, on the first Tuesday after the second Wednesday in December, which falls on December 17th this year, the electors will meet and cast their votes. The electoral votes will be counted on January 6th, and President-elect Trump will officially be sworn in on Inauguration Day, on January 20th. Bae Eun-ji, Arirang News.
And President Yoon Suk-yeol and U.S. President-elect Donald Trump held a brief talk over the phone early this morning, during which they agreed to set up an in-person meeting in the near future. Oh Soo-young covers this exchange and more.
President Yoon Suk-yeol and incoming US President Donald Trump agreed to meet in person soon and continue strong cooperation as they expressed concern towards North Korea's security threat and its involvement in the Ukraine war. This came during a 12-minute phone call on Thursday morning's Seoul time, just half a day following Trump's sweeping electoral victory on US exit polls. Yoon's office says the South Korean leader congratulated the president-elect on a significant victory, to which Trump expressed his gratitude and conveyed his warm regards to the people of South Korea. Amid North Korea's security threat to the Indo-Pacific and the world, and its deployment of troops to aid Russia's war with Ukraine, Yoon and Trump exchanged assessments of the ongoing developments and expressed mutual concern over the war situation. They also touched upon North Korea's evolving nuclear capabilities, ICBM launches, incursions of waste-carrying balloons, and GPS jamming in the West Sea. Trump and Yoon also discussed trilateral cooperation between South Korea, the US, and Japan. Yoon noted the three-way relationship has grown stronger, leading to the establishment of the trilateral Camp David framework. He said this is in part due to Trump's first term, which enabled trilateral cooperation. This comes amid concern in Seoul and Washington that a second Trump presidency would water down the efforts during the Biden administration to institutionalize the three-way cooperation reached at the Camp David summit in August last year. Under the Camp David spirit and principles, the three sides had agreed to hold annual top-level meetings, jointly deter North Korea's nuclear and missile threat, address regional and economic security issues, and collaborate on cutting-edge technologies. As Seoul and Washington upgraded their ties to a global comprehensive strategic alliance last year, Yoon told Trump he hoped the South Korea-US alliance would continue as a close partnership spanning security, economy, and all other areas. Trump agreed, saying he hopes to continue strong cooperation between their two countries. The two also agreed to jointly build up leadership in the Indo-Pacific region, the Korean Peninsula, and on a global scale. Trump added that he heard much about the South Korean president's leadership and mentioned that the US shipbuilding industry requires South Korea's support and cooperation. Separately, in a press conference on Thursday, Yoon said he had no concerns about working with Trump and that he'd been forming relationships with figures close to the incoming president. As Trump is likely to be briefed on North Korea, among other security-related issues, Yoon suggested to the media that they could talk more afterwards, perhaps with Japanese Prime Minister Shigeru Ishiba.
Yoon and Trump agreed on the need to meet in person to discuss bilateral issues more extensively. A Seoul presidential official told reporters that the incoming US president expressed his desire to meet as soon as possible. The date and location of their first meeting will be discussed promptly between their teams. Oseong, Arirang News.
Up next, we take a walk through Mr. Trump's journey from the U.S. corporate arena into the country's political scene. Here's our political correspondent, Shin Ha-young.
President-elect Donald Trump was born in 1946 in New York to a real estate mogul father. He graduated from the University of Pennsylvania's Wharton School and followed his father's path to become a businessman. Trump rose to fame through the reality TV show The Apprentice, where the catchphrase, "You're fired," became popular.
Kamala, you're fired. Get out, get out. You're fired.
Trump was interested in running as the Reform Party nominee, but lost in the party's presidential primaries in 2000. In 2016, he ran for president as a Republican candidate, beating Democrat nominee Hillary Clinton to become the 45th president of the U.S. During his presidency, his America First policies were reflected in trade wars with China, strict immigration measures, and business-friendly actions such as tax cuts and easing government regulation. In 2020, Trump ran for re-election with the slogan, "Keep America Great," but lost to current President Joe Biden. After the loss, he refused to accept the results and faced charges for allegedly inciting the 2021 January 6th Capitol riot. Trump became the first president in the U.S. to be impeached by the House twice and also the first U.S. leader to be tried for impeachment by the Senate after leaving office. He currently faces 4 criminal indictments with outcomes still pending. Despite many twists and turns, Trump ran for president again this year, reviving his 2016 slogan, "Make America Great Again." During a rally in Pennsylvania in July, he was wounded in the ear during an assassination attempt, a moment that quickly became a symbol of solidarity for many of his supporters and a grim reminder of political violence in the U.S.
This is a magnificent victory for the American people that will allow us to make America great again.
In securing a second term, Trump became the oldest president at age 78 and the second in U.S. history to lose re-election and later win a second term. 신하영, Arirang News.
And Mr. Trump has vowed to impose a tariff of at least double digits on all imports into the U.S. once in office. That being said, our business correspondent Moon Hye-ryun delves into the implications of this initiative for South Korea and beyond.
Newly elected U.S. President Donald Trump once said in an interview that tariff is his favorite word. Leading up to the election, he made across-the-board tariffs a central campaign pledge, proposing up to 20% tariffs across most foreign goods and higher levies for ones from China.
If I run this country, if I'm going to be president of this country, I'm going to put a 100, 200, 2,000% tariff.
But economists warn that his proposed policies, including high tariffs on imports, mass deportations of migrant workers, and interference in Federal Reserve interest rate decisions, could reverse the recent decline in U.S. inflation and lead to a resurgence in rising prices.
Trump's proposed policies, even though perhaps they're not as specific as Harris's announced policies, will have higher inflationary measures.
Trump argues that tariffs will revitalize domestic manufacturing, generate new jobs, and bring in revenue to support other policies like tax cuts. He has proposed extensive tax cuts, including extending the 2017 tax cuts, which largely benefited wealthier individuals, with the intent to offset costs through economic growth and tariffs. Analysts, however, caution that this plan could worsen the national deficit. This fiscal year, the U.S. ran its largest budget deficit ever outside the COVID-19 pandemic years, and an American think tank estimates that Trump's plans would pile up $7.5 trillion in new debt. Trump's proposed tariffs also threaten to impact global trade, including South Korea's. Seoul closely monitors Washington and Beijing's trade moves as its economy, especially in semiconductors, heavily depends on both markets.
The majority of our semiconductors are used in smartphones and computers, with China responsible for 60 to 70% of exports. So this is likely to take a hit.
Clean energy industries also face an uncertain future. Trump has rallied against related laws such as the Inflation Reduction Act, which is expected to pour as much as $1.2 trillion into developing renewable energy, and has provided electric vehicle battery firms such as LG Energy Solution and SK On with tax credits. To resign the law completely will be difficult, but the market remains wary of potential changes or delays. Moon Hye-ryun, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, Donald Trump's triumph sent Wall Street soaring to fresh highs. Our Lee Seung-jae has the closing numbers.
The U.S. economy was one of the biggest issues leading up to the presidential elections on Tuesday. Voters chose Trump, believing he's the right person to tackle economy-related issues. And during Wednesday's trading session on Wall Street, investors felt the same. Three major indexes all jumped to reach fresh all-time highs following the confirmation of Trump's win. The S&P 500 rose 2.5%, the Dow Jones Industrial Average jumped 3.6%, and the tech-heavy Nasdaq increased 3%. As Elon Musk has shown active support for Trump, Tesla jumped more than 14% during Wednesday's trading session. Trump, who's seen as a more active supporter of cryptocurrencies than his Democratic rival, saw that market pump as it became more and more apparent that he would win the U.S. presidential election. According to Binance, the price of Bitcoin as of 6 a.m. Korea Standard Time jumped 10% to surpass $76,000. Global oil prices fell as investors weighed a strong U.S. dollar on the news of Trump's win. Both the Brent and West Texas Intermediate futures for January delivery fell on the news of Trump's return to the Oval Office. The U.S. dollar rose to reach its highest level since September 2022. The dollar index, which measures the greenback against 6 major currencies, including the euro and the yen, rose 1.25%. Economists say the president-elect's tariff and immigration policies have been increasing the value of the U.S. dollar, while his foreign policy could squeeze global oil supply, leading to a decline in global oil prices. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
Also in the U.S., the first Korean-American senator-elect has pledged to repair, quote, broken politics and commit to healing the country. Speaking at a press conference in the hotel that he and his family lived at when they first moved to New Jersey, Andy Kim shared plans to take on his post with much humility, as the duty has been undertaken by just some 2,000 Americans throughout history. He also emphasized that his election ushers in a new political chapter. Now, Kim was first elected to Congress in 2018 and will now become one of 3 Asian American senators in office. President Yoon Suk-yeol addressed the nation in a televised speech early on this Thursday morning to mark the end of the first half of his term in office. The speech began with an apology for causing public concern. Our top office correspondent Kim Do-yeon tells us why.
At his halfway mark address and press briefing on Thursday, the first thing President Yoon Suk-yeol did was to apologize for recent criticism against him over his connections to an obscure political consultant, Myung Tae-gyun.
대통령이라는 것은 변명하는 자리가 아닙니다. 모든 것이 제 불찰이고 제 부덕의 소치입니다. 국민 여러분께 먼저 죄송하다는 말씀, 진심 어린 사과의 말씀부터 드리고 그리고 이 국정 브리핑을 진행하겠습니다.
This was the biggest issue at hand building up to the briefing. The main opposition, the Democratic Party of Korea, leaked a recorded phone call between then President-elect Yoon and Myung, during which they discussed the ruling party's candidate selection process ahead of a by-election in 2022. A president or president-elect shouldn't be interfering in party politics. Also, other recordings surfaced that showed First Lady Kim Gun-hee's connection with Myung and her possible involvement in politics. President Yoon denied any wrongdoing but accepted that he should have acted more cautiously when he became a politician. President Yoon did acknowledge that it was his fault for not changing the means of communication for him and his wife after becoming a public figure.
이게 전부 제 책임입니다. 왜냐하면 후보 시절과 또 당선인 시절과 대통령이 됨으로써 이 소통의 방식을 좀 매정하지만 바꿔야 됩니다.
Continuing on domestic politics, President Yoon also faced questions regarding what looks like a fallout with the ruling People Power Party chair Han Dong-hoon, who has been a close confidant of Yoon's since the two's prosecutor days, claiming that a part of that is from the media stirring more conflict. He also said, when both the top office and the ruling party work diligently together to deliver to the public, their relationship will naturally improve over time. President Yoon's answers to foreign policy questions were also highly anticipated as he came into the briefing just a couple hours after his phone call with U.S. President-elect Donald Trump. Concerns have been rising that the America First policy could impact South Korea's industries, but President Yoon instead showed optimism.
제가 트럼프 대통령이 얘기하는 이러한 정책들은 그건 우리 기업에게 굉장히 좀 불리하지 않냐. 난 참 걱정이다. 이런 얘기를 하면 걱정하지 마라. 또 그것이 어쨌든 한국 기업에게 크게 피해가 안 가게끔 여러 가지 잘 풀어나갈 것이니까 그런 얘기들을 계속 하더라고요.
He also touched on the war in Ukraine, especially with North Korea's deployment of troops for Russia. He said there are certain things from the deployment that could directly threaten the peace on the Korean peninsula. Therefore, depending on Pyongyang's involvement, he isn't ruling out weapon supply to Ukraine, beginning with defensive weapons. Kim Do-yeon, Arirang News.
In other news, Korea's current account balance remained in the black for the 5th month in a row in September, bolstered by global demand for chips and cars. Our Park Eun-woo covers the latest findings.
Favorable exports of IT products resulted in a bigger surplus for South Korea. Data from the Bank of Korea on Thursday showed that South Korea's current account balance in September recorded a surplus of over $11.1 billion. This is the 5th straight month that the country has been in the black. September saw the largest surplus in 3 months at almost double that of August. The goods account, which tracks exports and imports of products, logged a surplus and recorded an 18th straight month in the black. Exports in September rose by nearly 10% year-on-year, amounting to over $61.6 billion, while imports recorded $51 billion, resulting in a surplus of around $10.6 billion. Booming shipments of chips and ICT devices were a major factor, both jumping by over 30% year-on-year.
The semiconductor industry is expected to remain in a growth phase until the first half of 2025. Still, we need to wait and see as competition between regions is intensifying.
Shipments of automobiles also soared more than 6%. Hyundai Motor Group, the world's 3rd largest auto seller, even reported operating profits that outpaced that of the 2nd largest Volkswagen Group in the 3rd quarter. Amid concerns rising that trade conditions could get worse if President-elect Donald Trump raises tariffs after returning to the White House, one expert has a somewhat brighter prospect.
Trump is putting tariffs on everybody, not just Korea. So everybody will have same problems. I'm not sure if Korea's exports of semiconductors to the United States will fall by very much, because right now, United States has very little semiconductor production facility. Especially for memory chips.
Saying the lack of facilities will not be able to satisfy U.S. companies, he noted that Korea will be able to maintain high exports at least for a year or two, although this might depend on AI demands. Park Eun-woo, Arirang News. Meanwhile, in line with the global ambition of net zero emission come 2050, Korea is actively advancing its so-called Hydrogen City initiative. Our correspondent Lee Soo-jin has details.
Cities in South Korea, known for their advanced technology and vibrant culture, are now going green. And one city in Gyeonggi-do province is leading the nation's Hydrogen City initiative.
Hydrogen cities are cities equipped to produce, use, and transport hydrogen. Onsan City has turned to hydrogen to promote environmental sustainability and to revitalize its economy.
In the city of Ansan, one of the first 3 hydrogen cities in the nation, 1.8 tons of gray hydrogen is produced daily at this facility with its 3 steam methane reforming reactors. Inside the reactor, methane, a cleaner fossil fuel, undergoes 2 reactions, including one with water, to produce hydrogen. But it's a rather meticulous process as the water needs to be purified. The hydrogen produced is then transported through 13 kilometers of pipelines, partially underground, 2 charging stations and hydrogen fuel cell power plants. The city also plans to partner with private companies to build more hydrogen charging stations, anticipating a larger demand for hydrogen vehicles due to their lower risk of fire.
Hydrogen handling is already standardized, which ensures stability. When managed under high-pressure gas standards, the risk of explosion is minimal.
And at this hydrogen fuel cell power plant, hydrogen is fed into fuel cells that will generate electricity through an electrochemical reaction. This electricity is currently being supplied to the hospital right next to it, as well as to more than 500 homes. But gray hydrogen has its drawbacks as carbon dioxide is emitted during production, which is why the city is developing green hydrogen produced by renewable energy such as wind. Electricity from wind turbines powers these 2 electrolyzers to split purified water into oxygen and green hydrogen, which is then compressed for efficient transport in tube trailers. Although this facility is still in the testing phase, the city expects technologies like this to one day be used nationwide.
But efforts like this require significant funding to develop the necessary infrastructure technologies, which is why it's important to provide financial incentives and improve regulations in order to encourage investment. Lee Soo-jin, Arirang News.
A cycling race along the scenic southern coast of Korea kicked off today. The race runs until Sunday and comes in preparation for next June's international competition. The race course spans 280 kilometers across Dongyang, Gyeonggnam, Namhae and Changwon, areas known for their stunning scenery within the Gyeongsangnam-do province. Some 200 Korean cyclists and 50 professional team riders are taking part in this event.
With the evening cold at its peak this morning, it was chilly because of the cold wind even during the day. Following the first frost yesterday in Seoul, the first ice was observed today. This is 1 day earlier than last year and 4 days later than usual. Tomorrow it will be mostly sunny in inland areas and it will be colder than usual in the morning. The early winter cold will gradually ease as the temperature rises from tomorrow afternoon. It will be 17 degrees in the middle of the day in Seoul, about 3 degrees higher than yet today. Tomorrow, Chuncheon will start off at 2 degrees, Daegu and Gyeongju 6 degrees. Highs will move up to 17 degrees in Seoul, Daejeon, Daegu and Gyeongju 18 degrees. It is expected to be mostly sunny and above the usual temperatures over the coming weekend. That's all for Korea. Here are the weather conditions around the world.
Those are the headlines at this hour here in South Korea. Coming up next is our daily panel session.
천혜의 자연관광지와 이순신 장군의 충절의 정신이 공존하는 경상남도에서 투르드 경남 2014 스페셜 대회가 펼쳐집니다. 약속했다. 미래 100년의 도시 통영. 일상이 여행인 그곳 다정다감 거제. 매력발산 천만 생태 관광도시 국민고향 보물섬 남해. 변화와 혁신을 선도하는 도시 창원. 아름다운 경남 남해안의 관광지를 투어하는 투르드 경남 스페셜 대회에 여러분의 많은 관심 바랍니다.
How to survive in Korea. Weddings. Step 0. Attire. As a guest, dress formal to business casual. Avoid wearing all white, shorts or going topless. Step 1. Arrival time. Arrive 30 minutes prior to the wedding ceremony. Too many cars, too many halls, too many people. There are many twists and turns. Take pictures and shake hands. And write your name vertically, not horizontally, in the guest book. Step 2. Or, shibor. 50,000 won, 100,000 won, 150,000 won. Cash gifts are given in these units. Decide on the amount based on your relationship. Write your name vertically on the envelope. Step 3. Wedding etiquette. Fill up the front row. Guests have 3 duties to fulfill: clapping, cheering, and taking pictures. Step 4. Dining. Take off your jacket. This will be your seat from now on. Start with the not your everyday delicacies. Galbijjim. Yes. Bosa. Yes. Chili shrimps. Definitely yes. Kimbap. Yeah. Only if you can't live without it. No need to pile up food. You have more than one opportunity. Did you survive the wedding? Wait. Did someone catch your eye? What are you waiting for? You're looking fine today.
K-drama, the charm of Korea that captivates the world. Love like a K-drama. A story of us where hope and despair coexist. Fun and refreshingly satisfying. K-dramas carry warmth and move people's hearts. Meet the fascinating stories of Korea through K-dramas.
Former U.S. President Donald Trump has addressed his supporters, voicing victory over the 2024 U.S. presidential election. That being said, on Press Perspective today, we delve into the economic implications of his return to the White House for South Korea and beyond. Hello and welcome to Press Perspective for this Thursday, November 7th here in South Korea. I'm Min Sun-hee. Now, the term tariff was much touted by former U.S. President Donald Trump on his campaign trail, and given his expected return to the White House next year, today we touch upon the economic impact of the incoming U.S. administration on South Korea. For this, I have Lee Ji-hoon, a correspondent for Reuters, here in the studio. Ji-hoon, it's a pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you for having me.
I also have Professor Kim Yong-jin at Seogang University. Professor Kim, welcome to the program.
Good evening.
Right. We'll start here in the studio, Ji-hoon. Let's start off with the latest trends on global financial markets, including that here in South Korea.
Yes, so since October, global financial markets have been pricing in the likelihood of Trump's win a little by little already, with so-called Trump trading. In the bond market, for example, U.S. Treasury yields rose sharply in October, with the 10-year yield at around 4.3%, which was a 3-month high. And that pushed up the dollar index by more than 3% in October, which was the biggest monthly increase in 2 years. Because it was seen that Trump's policies of immigration and imposing tariffs were seen as likely to spark inflationary pressures in the United States. And that had an impact on domestic finance markets as well. For example, the $1 rate, which was around 1,300 in late September, rose sharply to 1,390 in just over a month. And in the stock market, the Kospi fell for the first straight month, and despite U.S. stocks trading at record high levels already, because there was uncertainty over U.S. elections, of course. But then analysts also said Trump's America First policy would likely boost U.S. stocks while making non-U.S. markets less attractive. Yesterday, starting early trading hours in Asia, Trump started to take a little lead in voting regions, and Trump trading became more evident across global financial markets, especially Asia. The dollar exchange rate for the first time since April rose above 1,400, which is a psychological barrier. And then in the stock market, stocks of automakers and battery firms, they fell sharply because of worries that Trump might impose tariffs on South Korean vehicles, and because Trump was seen as less supportive of, how I should say, climate-friendly policies like subsidies for electric vehicles. And that is why South Korea's automakers like Hyundai Motor and battery makers like LG Energy Solution, they fell sharply yesterday.
Right. So some of the key words in the financial stock markets across the globe appear to be Trump trading and Trump tariffs then. Chiun, you recently covered Korea's export growth for the month of October, which fell tangibly, of course. Now, pundits here, I believe, are linking this particular performance in the month of October to U.S. politics. What more can you tell us?
So in October, South Korea's exports fell rose for the 13th straight month, but the growth rate weakened sharply, and it was the lowest in 7 months. It had been expected that growth would weaken as we head towards the end of the year because of base effects that would negatively affect annual comparison, but still, it was much weaker than market expectations, with the growth rate at 4.6% compared with 6.9% seen in our survey. There was a pickup in exports to China. A breakdown of the data showed to the highest in 25 months, but exports to United States were rather weak, growing only 3.4%, which was the slowest since last August. Economists said that there was weak recovery in Chinese demand thanks to hopes around recent stimulus measures, but demand in the United States was subdued because of uncertainty over U.S. elections. And that came despite a recent rate cut by U.S. Federal Reserve in September.
Right. And Professor Kim, I'm wondering, is this reality of slowing exports a broader phenomenon affecting other countries as well, or is it just South Korea? Is South Korea the only one witnessing this particular reality?
Well, I think the slowing export of Korea would be the key signal of global economy downturn. Usually the Korean export was the very important signal for global economy because we export a lot of the part and middle, product. So the International Monetary Fund estimated the growth rate of the world economy would be 3.1% this year and next year, which is lower than that of pre-pandemic era. The reasons are a lot, include high interest rate, broader geopolitical tensions, and regional conflict, a possible resurgence of financial market volatility with adverse effect on sovereign debt market, a deeper growth slowdown in China, the continued ratcheting up of protectionist policies, renewed spikes in commodity prices, intensifying debt threats in emerging market and developing economies. In addition, many countries suffer aging population, weak productivity, and extreme policy uncertainty. About 64 countries, which represent about half of the global population, have or will have newly elected government in 2024. In this situation, how could the world economy grow? And these factors also affect the slowing growth in rate of Korean export, and it probably will be worse in the next year. What I'm saying is that Korea is not the only country that experiences a low growth rate in export. Of course, some of the structural issues of Korean industry, like heavy reliance on several industries of semiconductor, automobile, shipbuilding, and chemicals, which might be affected by the global economy the most, may affect the low performance in Korean export.
Right. Meanwhile, Chiun, the U.S. election on November 5th also decides which party holds the reins of each chamber of the U.S. Congress. Now, that being said, how does that reality look to affect the policies of the president moving forward?
So if we go back to Trump trading, U.S. Treasury yields have been rising because there were expectations that U.S. fiscal deficit would widen because of Trump's policy that promised tax cuts and more spending. And now with the Trump being elected already, and the Republicans already won the majority in the Senate. The key will be whether the Republicans will win in the House of Representatives, and which many analysts and pundits call it a red sweep. So they will be key for Trump's economic policies, especially the House of Representatives, because the House is in charge of approving government budget, and that will determine if Trump can proceed with his promises of tax cuts and more spending to boost the economy.
Right, and staying with Mr. Trump's pledges, Professor Kim, now, Mr. Trump, he voiced opposition to President Biden's Inflation Reduction Act, but to root it out, he needs congressional support, of course. What do you believe are his chances of abolishing this act? Of course, keeping in mind what our Ji-hoon has just said here in the studio.
Well, his chance of abolishing the act is very high. Mr. Trump is known to be a strong disbeliever of, climate change. He withdrew from, Paris Agreement in 2017. At the time, he said that he withdrew from the agreement to protect the U.S. and the U.S. citizens. The focus of Inflation Reduction Act is not only on inflation reduction, but also on investing huge money in developing climate technologies and supporting the economy for the transition to the net zero society. He does not seem to support the policy. And then the recent election results look like to, help him do whatever he wants to do. Probably the Republican Party may hold the reins of both chambers of the U.S. Congress. Or absolutely, we have to, see what will be happening in House yet. But that's likely. With a victory in the election, he will absolutely abolish or weaken the Inflation Reduction Act, as well as the most important act, we are concerned is CHIPS Act, that also too.
Right. Ji-hoon, moving forward, the U.S. Federal Reserve is soon expected to share its latest monetary policy. Now, there are high expectations, that is, for yet another rate cut, regardless, of course, of the politics in the U.S. What is your outlook?
Yeah, there is market consensus that the Federal Reserve will lower interest rates by 25 basis points at the meeting ending tomorrow, Seoul time, and after a bigger than usual 50 basis point rate cut in September. And most economists expect the Fed to cut rates again in December by 25 basis points and more next year to bring down its target range to the 3% range from the current 4.75 to 5%. When it comes to implications, of course, different economic policies mean different economic conditions. And both candidates, both Trump and Harris, prior to the election, they promised policies that would spark inflationary pressures. But many analysts said Trump's policy would more likely spark more inflationary pressures. So there is a possibility that Trump's policies, if implemented, would delay Fed's rate cut cycle next year. And financial markets these days, or yesterday and today, it seems they are already pricing in a slower rate cuts by the Federal Reserve with the end of the rate cut cycle approximately 1 percentage point higher than what had been expected in dot plots projected by Fed officials in September.
Right, I see. Meanwhile, Professor Kim, what would be the impact of the Fed's policy direction on the Bank of Korea's monetary policy?
Well, like Ji-hoon mentioned, U.S. Fed would be trapped in a very difficult situation next year, but at least this year, they are expected to cut, the base rate, twice. So this year's policy is very clear, but next year we don't know due to newly elected President Trump's policy. But anyway, if the Fed will cut the rate twice this year and by 0.5%, which will make the rate 4.25 to 4.5% at the end of the year. In this case, the rate gap between Korea and the U.S. will be 1 percentage point. This gap may allow some room for the Bank of Korea to cut the base rate by 0.25%. The problem the Bank of Korea faces is not the consumer price or unemployment, but higher volatility in the financial market, like foreign exchange rate, which is happening after Mr. Trump is re-elected as the president. Even though the increases in consumer price and household debt are low and stable, and there are some concerns about economic slowdown in Korea, the Bank of Korea is expected to keep the current rate, base rate, same, because it needs to check the effect of the last rate cut, in September on the economy and consider the increasing volatility in the financial market.
All right, lots of factors to consider then. Yoon, an exclusive report by Reuters earlier claimed that, and I quote, China is eyeing $1.4 trillion in fiscal stimulus, and even more if Mr. Trump is elected. Could you tell us a bit more about this particular coverage?
Yes, so recently China has been building several stimulus measures to prop up its economy, which is expected to underperform its target of 5% annual growth this year. And according to our report, China is expected to announce this week after its important policy meeting that it will inject $1.4 trillion to support the property sector and local governments. And so about more than half will be to help local governments reduce their debts, and the rest will be to help construction sector already having a hard time with high debt. But many economists say, although this is a very huge amount figure-wise, but then these measures are seen more as stabilizing measures rather than measures that are boosting demand in China. So in terms of implications for South Korea and the global economy, we'll have to see if it really boosts consumer demand in China and global trade. Yeah.
Right, staying with that, Professor Kim then, how does the size of China's fiscal support plan look to affect South Korea?
Yeah, I mean, in general, the answer would be the more the size of China's fiscal, support, then it would, have more effect on Korean economy. Because, China is one of the largest trade partner of Korea. And also, if the money, Chinese government money goes to like real estate and the construction, which have imported Korean materials the most, so Korean economy would be helped. Basically, China's fiscal support will help Chinese people and companies purchase more from Korean companies. However, I don't like, say however, but we have to think about that, right? However, considering the fact that Korea's auto and electric vehicle battery industry have become a large importer of few materials, raw materials from China, while China has, steadily cut back on import from Korea in favor of domestic industries, which resulted in the trade deficit of Korea with China in 2023, the stimulus package may not have much effect on Korean export. One more thing we have to think about is that the competitive advantage of Chinese industry and companies increases dramatically recently to compete with Korean companies in most areas of trade. the Korean economy may not enjoy the benefit of the fresh stimulus.
Right. Jiun, aside from the U.S. election result, then, what other factors look to affect the global economy down the road?
So, of course, we will have to watch how Trump's economic policies actually turn out next year, because many market watchers have said during the first presidency of Donald Trump, many of his actions actually turn out to be much softer than his words. So we'll have to see if those tariffs and those kind of trade barriers, we'll have to see how they turn out. And then other than that, of course, we have geopolitical events going on around the world, especially the war in Middle East and even the Ukraine war and North Korea's involvement. So many policymakers are saying these geopolitical events are raising uncertainty over exports, global trade, supply chain, and especially energy supplies for Korea. So we'll have to watch how these events unfold, because these events cannot be predicted by anyone.
Right, so time will tell us then.
Yeah.
All right, Yoon, thank you so much for your time and your thoughts today. And Professor Kim, thank you very much for your insights today.
Thanks for having me.
Right, well, that ends this edition of Press Perspective. Thank you for watching. See you same time tomorrow.
K-drama, the charm of Korea that captivates the world. Love like a K-drama.